Welcome to the Lowdown Mortgage Podcast, the show where we dive deep into the topics that directly impact the mortgage architects that are building design into their business to unlock scale and achieve freedom. I'm your host, Connor Bartley. Bam! And joining me today is someone who spent years learning that when life takes things away from you, you get to decide what you put in their place. And she has chosen joy every single time. She's a mom of 3 young kids, a mortgage originator who built her business through creativity and resilience in equal measure, and someone who has never once let a hard season have the final word. Blaire Laudermilk, welcome to the Lowdown.
Thank you, Connor, for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Your story really resonated with me, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of the people who are listening today. But I want to start with this because when we first started talking, one of the things I ask is like, what would you like to get out of being on the podcast? What message would you like to get out there? And I loved your response to that, which was, finding joy in chaos. And before we get into like the business end of things, I wanted to go there first. Like what does finding joy in the chaos mean to you? And where did you sort of learn to view life through that lens?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of experiences this when they've hit, I don't want to necessarily say rock bottom, but a really hard season of life. And, the saying you can either sink or swim. And I decided to swim, and there's another really good saying around right now is choose your heart. And we can sit there and we can wallow in our misery, or we can choose to pivot and enjoy that time and focus on what is the positive during that moment. So without going into, a full blown story, it took me almost 2 years to be able to walk without being in pain. And it could either break me or I could choose to, okay, what can I do with this moment? And so that's what we did. We figured out how can we shift this with our life, how can we shift this with business? And we really did learn to find that joy amidst what felt like a hurricane, a little more than chaotic. When everything's literally crashing, I mean, your ability to be able to walk, you wake up every day thinking that that's, at least for me, I felt like it was guaranteed, and it's not, and learning how to deal with all the doctor's visits and dealing with life still goes on, whether or not you're struggling or not. And we choose to, rise out of that fire. And I'm very thankful because it's changed our perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, and it changed the way you had to do business too. And we'll get into that. But I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit onto your origin story into mortgage. So you got your license at 19 and worked as an assistant in LOA before sort of going out on your own. What was something that surprised you most about building a book of business from scratch now that you've actually gone through that process and had to, be an originator on your own? You're doing a great job, by the way, too.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I grew up being around the business. Both of my parents were in the industry. So I saw it, it at the forefront every single day. And my parents were great. They made it look easy, but it's not. And those first 12 months are the hardest. I always try to encourage new loan officers, if you can make it through the first 12 months, you can make it through the industry, I promise. And I remember just going day after day, doing activity after activity. And sure enough, after about 12 months, it hit, So, I mean, I only did, I think, 4 deals my first year. And then the following year, I did 121. So, it's just like you have to keep, what's the phrase where like compounding interest, like it builds up. It's not like it inclines like this. It will shoot off if you keep that activity running. And so I think that was my hardest part there.
So while you're going through that, right, like that's a valley for sure. You get into the business and you're assisting someone who's very successful. You're seeing that success. You want to have it for yourself. You go out to do it on your own. And then, 4 deals in a year. What are you leaning on in that time to keep you motivated and to stay disciplined? Because that's the kind of like trough that I see people go through where they start to seek out shortcuts and quick fixes, and they start cutting corners that ultimately cost them in the long run. But it seems like you stayed disciplined on the basics and the fundamentals and the work that over time started to compound dramatically. So what were the things that kind of kept you in the fight?
Yeah. At the time, I just kept my eye on the prize. I knew that it would come through eventually. Now, if I could offer that same advice, my coach mentioned to me recently, stop focusing on the deals and focus on the activity. So we're paid for the conversations. We're not paid for the deals, you know? And if I would have been told that way back when, I think my mindset would have been even a little bit more different then, you know? But I just knew, okay, if I just keep doing this, if I just keep doing this, I just keep doing this, it's going to pan out, you know? And it did, obviously. And I'm very grateful. And it's been great since. But, you know, then you just got to sustain it at that point, you know?
Yeah, and I think there's a math problem in there too, right? Like when you break it down by activities versus by the deals, and you say, okay, I make X amount of basis points on a deal, but I need Y amount of conversations to get one, then, vis-a-vis, like each conversation is worth Z amount, right? Like when you start to break it down like that. And when you start to understand those numbers, then you go, okay, well, if I just have a few more conversations, then, I'm going to start making more and more, have more deals, and it all ends up working out in the end. So I love that the focus is on that activity. I think that's a really smart way of looking at it.
Right.
So kind of back to what we were talking about earlier, you went through a period of time, 2 years, where you were not able to walk without pain, and it changed the way you were operating your business, because previously you were face to face, coffee drops, going by the offices, things like that, and then taken away. What was the moment that you stopped asking what you, or stopped focusing on what you couldn't do and started focusing on what you could?
Yeah. I like to have a 5-minute funeral, so it didn't last very long, you know, and I realized very quickly I wasn't in a space that I could go out and be face to face. I couldn't even drive during that time. So it's really humbling. Hey, honey, can you like drive me over here? You know, like no, you can't do that. My husband has a job too. So I had to very quickly realize, okay, I can call, I can have conversations, but really what I shifted to primarily was my social media and realizing, hey, you know, this is working pretty good. Like I've done this for a couple of years now. It's working good. Like let's just focus on making this a priority. And sure enough, it did help. And I'm very, very grateful for the social media presence because first off, it's educational for those consumers, for the potential buyers or people refinancing, but even my referral partners, you know, they're able to then share that out to their people as well, or even just educate themselves in the process. So the social media was really pivotal for me because I was able to stay face to face without being face to face, if that makes sense, you know,
For sure.
and you get to know people. It's so funny. Like when we do an apple picking event for our past clients. And then when I saw people in person and I hadn't been able to connect with them, they're like, oh my gosh, your kids, they're so getting so big. And I'm like, oh my word, like social media, they've watched everything, like, so they know, which is so cool. I love that about social media that we're still able to connect even though we aren't physically face to face.
So, since that was like a core part of your prospecting and business development, did you start to notice, like, what trends did you start to notice about your audience? Was there, and the content that you should be making? Did you start to see a better response from referral partners versus clients, or vice versa? Kind of what were your observations there?
Yeah, for the longest time, I did it focused on just consumer. So a buyer or someone that's wanting to refinance. That was all that I focused on, educational content, because I feel like that's really missing in society in general. People just don't understand mortgages, you know? So then I started shifting it to some of the referral partners. And it's been funny. I've actually had a lot of agents reach out to me to connect with me because they see the content. So they know if I'm educating on that platform, of course, I'm doing that behind the scenes on the phone calls, etc. So it's been good to see the transformation that what you put into your social media is what you get out. So as I started transitioning some content for my partners as well, then it started being beneficial for new opportunities with other partners in addition to my current partners. So that was really good to see that change.
Yeah, I just think it makes a lot of sense, right? I think the realtors are more on social media for business versus someone who might be on there to keep in touch with family and do those types of things. And so the likelihood of the agent kind of coming across the content um and engaging with it and really kind of taking it to heart versus someone who's just sort of scrolling through, is there's a higher probability of the agent sort of spending time on it. And, to that end, it seems like the social media presence is a little bit like, a resume, right? When you meet a new agent, if they've seen your content, they see you before you know you mentioned that. What kind of first impression are you trying to make and how intentional are you about crafting that?
Yeah, when someone comes across my page, I want them to first know like the professionalism and, the wealth of knowledge that we have here. I have been doing it since I was 19, and I want people to know, hey, we've served a lot of families in that process, so I've learned a lot during that process. So I think the education is key because typically when someone wants to apply online, like I talked to a client yesterday and they're like, hey, we are pre-approved with so and so. I won't say the name, but we were pre-approved with so and so. It was a big bank, and I was like, okay, what were you educated on? And they're like, we just got a letter. I'm like, okay, did you talk payments? Did you talk? I don't know anything. I just know this is my amount. And I think that that's such a critical thing right now because people aren't being educated, and they're like, well, we were told, hey, reach out to me if you have questions. I'm like, well, you don't know what you don't know. So what questions do you know to ask when this is your first time buying a house? How are you don't know anything to ask. All that you've been taught is to ask what my interest rate is, and that's it, right? And that's what they ran into. And so I was like, these are the pieces that we need to focus on. And it's so sad because people really need the education to know this is what it is, and it's not this big scary thing that's going to happen in life.
So I'm curious, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this or not, but I mean, it feels like I hear this come up a lot, right? There's just a lack of client education, and it feels like sometimes the client is sort of being rushed through a process. How do we get better on that? Because is that just someone who's taking the application and just hoping to run for the best or run with it and it'll just be done and get it over with, or should we be pausing more, educating, even if it means costing us that deal, but knowing that we're doing the right things? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you've got a bigger problem here than just the mortgage industry is a lot of people just don't care anymore. But if we go deeper into the mortgage industry is I think people taking care of human beings is so important, and taking the time to do that. So if you don't have that time as a loan officer, then you need to analyze your systems. If you don't have time to have a consultation with each client, you don't have enough support staff. If you can't do the basics of the education process to educate them, these are what your fees mean. This is what the difference is between us and this company, and taking the time to educate them the side by side. And even if you don't win the deal, it's okay. But at least now you set that buyer up because guess what? They'll probably send your friends or family because you took the time to do it. So I think it's a system issue if you don't have the time as a loan officer to be educating them.
Yeah, well, I love that. And so you went from 4 deals in a year to 100 plus, which probably put a lot of pressure on systems. And fun social media story is that you and your production partner actually found each other almost by accident through a LinkedIn post. And how did you know that she was the right person for the job? And what were the first few months of that relationship like?
Yeah, so I have to correct you. I keep my deals on this back wall in my office to keep me humble of where I came from. So all of my first few years, and I lied to you. It was 8. So I apologize.
Hey, so you did double. Well,
I mean,
I mean, that's 100% increase.
of
So
course. So I
I love
apologize.
it.
But Anywho, I will feel so guilty that I didn't release that. It was a
All right. Clear
yeah,
conscience. Clear conscience.
my current production partner, she has only been with me for 3 years. So during that transition of the 8 to over 100, that was when I was on a previous team. So, but Susan has been with me for 3 years. It was after COVID, which I'm sure you remember this. It was a hard season, and we had gone through, the mortgage industry, a lot of layoffs, and I'm one of those people that I will just take on whatever I can so that way I can protect everybody else. Like, let me just take it on. Don't worry about it. And I realized after doing that for so long after COVID, I was running everything on my own. I couldn't do it anymore. I mean, I literally had no quality of life whatsoever. And it's like, for what is it worth? Like, obviously, like, I'm helping all these other people build their dreams, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But if I keep doing this, I won't have any family myself, So I decided I need to start searching and I needed to find my unicorn. And I knew exactly what I wanted in that moment. Someone that really knew their craft, someone that knew how to help structure that as I'm out on appointments, as I'm doing this, which I love doing, nothing's getting missed because guess what? On my phone right now, it's going straight to her. So everything's being handled. And I wanted that so much. And so my managers were even so funny and I love them dearly. They're going to die when they hear this on this call. They're like, "You're not going to find that, Blaire." I was like, "Yes, I am. I'm going to find it." So they helped me put together a post. We put it on LinkedIn. And she knew one of my managers from a previous, mortgage company. And it was a God thing. We posted it out there. She saw it. She was like, "Oh, that's weird. Why did he post that?" She looks at it and she had, on the flip side, been told she would never find that job opportunity as well. And so it was a really, really, really cool moment that we both had no, you can't do that. And then we both ended up with it. And I knew immediately when I met her, she just genuinely cares. To me, that's the most important thing. Do you care about human beings? First and foremost. And second, she had the knowledge base to be able to take on that position. And every single question that I quizzed her on, quote unquote, she was able to get it done. She knew the answer, if not more than what I asked her, and she's been with me now for 3 years and she's really pushed me in a lot of ways. And, I'm one of those people, save your tears for your pillowcase. And she operates that way too. We don't have time. Like, let's get in, let's do our job, let's go home and enjoy our families. And, and she's very much so that mindset. So it's great because we're on the same wavelength in a lot of ways. Yeah. So.
Well, and you shared a story with me that I just loved, and I hope you don't mind me sharing it, but you mentioned that after having her on the team, you had a morning where you were able to actually slow down, make pancakes with the kids. You took a picture, sent it to her just to say thank you, which I think is awesome. And like, what did that moment sort of represent for you beyond just having a good morning?
Yeah. Yeah, that was it was really freeing. Like I said, you go through COVID and you go through all these hard times and you go, what is it worth? And I got in this business to provide for my family, and all the structures along the ways have been to protect my family, to make sure that they're getting mom, not only loan officer, but they're getting mom. And after going through all of that time of working nonstop. I mean, when I say working nonstop, it's not like, oh, I worked 8-hour days and whew, I'm exhausted. Like, it was, I put down my newborn child at 10 o'clock at night. And you can ask some of my past clients, goodness, I can't get that off. You can ask some of my past clients at that time. I would have the conversation with them. Hey, you might get an email at 12 a.m. Don't be alarmed. I'm working. I will not talk to you on the phone, but I'm working on your file. And I would put the baby down at 10. He would wake up to nurse at 2 a.m. I would nurse him and I would go to sleep from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. And the only time that I spent time with my husband was at dinner time. Everything else was working around the clock. And so again, like you're like, okay, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. And after so long of not having my family, it's like, what is it worth? And so when she came on board, that was one of the things I expressed to her. I was like, I want to be able to be mom sometimes, and that morning, I will never forget it. We were just making pancakes, chocolate chip pancakes, and I didn't have my phone, and I was able to actually focus on my kids, and I sent it to her, and I was like, thank you. And we still talk about it to this day because it was such an eye-opening moment of sometimes when you go through such a hard time, you forget what is reality and what is normal. And in that moment, when I was able to experience normal of like having a good, slow morning with my kids, I was like, this is what it was worth. All of that hard was worth it. Now I get to wake up, have breakfast with them every day, and she's managing that in the morning. And then when my nanny comes in, I can focus on what I'm good at.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so are you like getting to a place where you're starting to set different boundaries and, different just structure around what your day looks like and being able to delegate things here and there so that you can get into that next level of freedom where you're, you know, I've heard there's financial freedom, relational freedom, purpose freedom, and time freedom, and they kind of compound. This is from what Shayla Gifford mentioned on a previous episode of the show, and I thought it was just a well laid out kind of process that people should really start to be thoughtful of. Where are you on that, and what are the freedoms that you're starting to really target, and like where are you on that scale? Would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we're probably still going through the financial freedom. I think you've noticed a trend with me. I just will, what's the saying, bootstrap it, and just get it done. And we have been in mid real estate portfolio building, the last since 2020. So I don't really feel like I have the time freedom yet. I feel like there's not enough hours in the day. I will say from a mortgage business standpoint on this, sole purpose, I mean, I cut it off at 7 every day. That's kind of the boundary that we've created. My husband will allow a 30-minute buffer if everything's on fire. That is my kind of built-in buffer that we allow. And that shifted after it was around 2021 that I put that in place to be sure that I can at least have dinner with my family every night. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think anybody who's, this industry has a history of creating really obsessive people over the job. You just see it not just loan officers, but just people in mortgage in general. It's, processors, underwriters, closers, everybody who's attached to it because there's this, I guess, this desire to help other people achieve those dreams of home ownership. And it's really inspiring when you see that around the industry. But there has to be a time where you cut it off, like for the long haul. I mean, if you're, doing this over, a 30-year career, that's gonna really burn you out. So I'm glad that you've started putting that in place. And I know like you shared this with me, and I really appreciate you sharing it with me. But your dream is to have property and horses and a nonprofit that serves veterans or kids with disabilities, or maybe both, in some capacity, and then have a mortgage business that runs, on its own, right? Where you are popping in maybe just a few times a week.
yeah.
If someone handed you the resources to make that happen in 5 years instead of 20, like where would you start? What's the starting point for something like
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. I would love that to happen in 5 years. We'll just try to figure out how to make it happen. Yeah, I love horses. So being able to give back, especially I love working with veterans, anybody that's frontline, and to be able to give back. Gosh, me and my processor were talking about a veteran this morning, actually. It's just, you don't go overseas to plan on coming back a different person, and it happens. I see it more often than not. So I've researched a lot that, horses actually can help veterans with PTSD, and just being able to give back to that community, I think would be really, really awesome to watch. It, I guess in order to start that, at first I'd have to find the land. I would probably first have to do that. it would be great if I could be local closer to town. So then that way I could, extend that reach to more people. I think that that would give people the ability to come more often. And then just getting, the proper people in place. That's every business is making sure that the people that genuinely support your goals of what you're wanting to do, whether that's a not for profit or not, you still need to have that right structure in place to help make sure that runs smoothly. And I think that that would be such a blessing to be able to share with others. And I don't know, I think it's because it feels like such a far stretched dream. I haven't really thought about the logistics of it yet, but I know for sure land would be a priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention that, and I wanted to put it out there sort of as a challenging question, because I think, and this is just something I learned from, Dr. Benjamin Hardy's Science of Scaling, which is, you come up with this big impossible goal, and then you put it on a time horizon that's shorter, and you use time as a tool, and you start to see how you need to make changes. It just makes you think completely differently, right? And you start to see things in a way of, okay, well, if I was going to achieve that big impossible thing over the course of 5 years instead of over 20,
Right.
how would I do it? What would need to happen? And then you start to see, maybe it's not so impossible. Maybe, and maybe I could do these things. And so anyway, I just think it's fun to think that way. And
Yeah.
I wish more people would, because I think we would all have, more fulfillment in our lives if we allowed ourselves the opportunity to dream a little.
Yeah.
And then go fight for those dreams. So anyway, well, Blaire, we've talked about a lot, and I've asked a lot of questions, and I was just curious if there was something maybe I didn't ask, or something that you came to this podcast today hoping to talk about that you haven't had an opportunity to. Advice you want to share, wisdom, anything like that. I want to give you the opportunity to do that now and just take the floor. So floor is yours, Blaire. Say whatever might be on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I first off, I appreciate the opportunity immensely. Being able to share a little bit of my story is always fun to do, and if it inspires one person, it was worth it. And I think that it's just the thing that I can offer to anybody, whether that's a loan officer or just anyone that's listening to this, is you can find joy regardless of what time you're going through. And I didn't even get to share. Right after I started being able to walk, I got a concussion. It's like there has been every life thing that could happen. I could have focused on it, but we chose not to. And we can focus on the beautiful things of during that time we were able to learn to slow down. You don't have to run all the time. Learn to then pivot to some hobbies at home. I learned to planted wildflowers at my house, and my kids thought it was the coolest thing ever. So you can surely make the most out of those hard seasons and use it as a learning tool for you of, okay, how can I now shift what is my life was here, but we don't, Ben Hardy, I think, was the one. I want to say, now that I'm going to try to quote whoever it was, I'm going to probably screw up. But there was someone that said, we don't need to learn off of what is our past. We need to know what is our future. And then based on our future, that's how we live today. So kind of like what your goal, and Ben Hardy does talk about that bell curve instead of that incline slowly over time. What is the future that I want to live, and how does that impact me instead of what is my past? Because if you're looking at your past and you're going, man, today stinks, then you're never going to keep succeeding in life, and defining what is bad. My husband and I talk about this all the time. What is a bad day? And when you can define what is that bad day, I will reassure you, and I can almost guarantee you probably aren't having bad days. It was a bad moment. And so my bad day is to go back to not being able to walk again. So every day that I wake up now and I can get out of my bed and I can walk and I can sit on the floor with my kids and I can read a story to them, it's a fantastic day. I had a great day, So just shifting that mindset, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You can get through it and you can find joy through it still.
Yeah. Well, Blaire, I love all that, and I really appreciate you being on the lowdown, sharing your story here with us and for anyone who's listening. And just thank you for being authentic and for being open about everything. So I appreciate you, and I wish you nothing but the best in the future.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it.